I've been through many different challenges in my life that has taught me the power of God's grace in my life, the power of resilience, the power of forgiveness, the power of hope. Everything that is who I am today was born out of one pain or another. So my backstory is, a girl who gets pregnant at 19, has a child, has to navigate through law school at this young age, battling being a single parent, trying to navigate a legal career, different financial challenges. Sometimes when we're walking this walk of faith, we feel like we have to be a certain way. We have to be perfectly righteous. We have to have all the scriptures in our heads. We have to pray a million tongues before we feel like God can hear us. I come as I am. And sometimes the way I come is really raw. It's my most wicked version of myself. And I come to him and he doesn't judge me as I am. God, there is no ending with him.
Welcome to the Mountains of Influence podcast. I'm Abimbola Lide, and here we have deep conversations with top-tier kingdom-minded professionals leading in the marketplace, uncovering the principles, challenges, and faith-driven strategies that have guided these leaders to not only excel in their fields, but also use their influence for a higher purpose. For our listeners, this means access to invaluable lessons on navigating their own careers with purpose, overcoming obstacles, and discovering how to integrate faith and excellence in their professional lives. And today, I have with me Banke Sotomi, a distinguished figure in the realm of leadership and executive coaching, wielding a wealth of corporate excellence and experience exceeding 2 decades. As a qualified commercial lawyer, she has traversed the corporate landscapes of both the UK and Nigeria, integrating her coaching practice with a distinctive synthesis of legal equity and coaching prowess. She is recognized by the Life Coaches Associations of Nigeria, ELCAN, and affiliated with esteemed bodies like the International Coaching Federation, ICF Nigeria Chapter, and European Mentoring and Coaching Council. Banke exhibits an unwavering commitment to instigating positive change. Banke's proficiency extends across diverse sectors, including government, banking and finance, oil and gas, retail, education, and technology. Noteworthy is her tenure as an executive career development coach at the Said Business School, University of Oxford, where she steered Executive MBA students through nuanced career transitions and leadership development strategies. Presently serving as a senior diversity and inclusion consultant, Banke addresses systemic issues at distinguished institutions such as higher education establishments, the Bank of England, and the Metropolitan Police. As a distinguished member of the Chartered Management Institute, Banke holds a part-time diploma in Level 5 Management and Leadership. Complementing her extensive qualifications, she recently concluded the esteemed Oxford Women's Leadership Development Program at the University of Oxford, UK. Please welcome with me the amazing, brilliant Banke Sotomi to the Mountains of Influence podcast. Hello, Coach Banke.
Well, thank you so much. Wow, that was a very long profile that you just read out. I thought you wanted a short one.
I just needed to show you off. They just needed to know the stuff that you're made of.
Thank you. Very
How
glad to be
today?
on.
How are you doing today?
Yeah,
Welcome
very
to the
well.
Mountains of Influence podcast. So like we always do on this podcast, we always start with a question. What does influence mean to you?
So thank you very much for having me on your podcast, Abimbola, and well done on the work that you do. I follow you and I know you're part of my community as well. So I'm really super proud at the work that you're doing. So I think for me, influence is, about one, owning your own essence and your own power. So what do I mean by that? It is about understanding what you are packaged with and knowing the impact that you have the potential to make. And then in understanding and embodying that, you then become a vessel to execute that body of impact that you hold. So influence is about one, having a very strong sense of who you are, what you are here on this world, in this world for, what it is that you are called to deliver, and then running to impact that so that other people can feel that experience and have that transformation that comes with you as well. So that's what I would say influence is, your capacity to hold your value and then share that value with others so that they hold their value and share their value with others as well. Yeah.
Amazing. So for you, influence is all about the value that you bring to the table and how you're able to extract that same value out of other people.
But I think it starts with your value. I think it starts with knowing your value. Yeah. Really not just knowing your value, but being a believer in the value that you hold. Because many people have value, but they don't know they have the value. And if you don't know you have the value, you can't hold that value to then impact and influence. So I think it's the starting point is really, having that strong conviction in yourself that you are someone of value, and then running with that conviction to impact.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so good. No, like you said, that was a really long bio, and I had to even cut it short and just look for some meaty areas, to just let our audience know who Banke Sotomi is. But that's the bio. It's beautiful, and that is where you are right now. But there is always a story in the glory. There is always a background. There's always somewhere that the person is coming from, and I think a whole lot of people can resonate much more with that. You understand? So usually we'd like to know, who is Banke Sotomi? Tell us who you are. Tell us about you and your mountain of influence. Which mountain are you standing? Where are you showcasing the light of God? So who are you, your background, where you're coming from, and what is your mountain?
Yeah, thank you. I do agree that we all have a background story. And I think it is important that we don't just get caught up in the glory or the glamour of the end product, but we have an appreciation of the starting point.
Exactly.
And so for me, I'm a woman of grace. I've been through many, many, many different challenges in my life that has taught me the power of God's grace in my life, the power of resilience, the power of forgiveness, the power of hope, the power of perseverance. And so my backstory really starts from, a young girl who, for some reason, felt lost in the world, wanting to find her place, but never quite knowing what that place looked like. And as a result of that lack of confidence, if you like, it spilled over into making very, different choices at very young ages, where it became something that really tested who I was as a person. So my backstory is, a girl who gets pregnant at 19, has a child, has to navigate through law school at this young age, and then, battling being a single parent, trying to navigate a legal career, different financial challenges. And so resilience is a very, very big part of who I am, because I faced many odds that in the average landscape of things, most people wouldn't really get to the end point that I've gotten to. It's not by my own sheer determination. That's why I said I'm a product of grace, because I recognize that had it not been for the grace of God, the wisdom, the favor, the support and love of God, I wouldn't be where I am today. So that's kind of where my story starts. And then it evolves into, navigating complex relationships, making mistakes in certain areas of my life in regards to that, emotional healing. And that's actually what began my journey in this coaching space, where I had to go through, a number of coaching interventions and therapies to help me with grief, to help me with my emotional baggage, traumas, and in realizing that if I can heal, everybody else has the opportunity for healing and transforming their lives. And that's kind of really where my journey into helping other women, particularly, transform their lives from a place of pain to purpose. So the mountain that I stand on, to answer your question specifically, is a mountain of pain and purpose. Everything that is who I am today was born out of one pain or another, and recognizing that there is always healing available when your heart is ready to heal.
Wow, amazing. Wow. So there is always healing when your heart is ready to heal. There's a whole lot to unpack there. So, my next question would be, in all of this, what has been your Jesus experience? What's your most profound Jesus experience that you can say, oh my God, it was at this junction that I know that God is really real? You understand? Like you mentioned, the pain of the trauma, everything, moved you in the direction of coaching, getting coaching interventions and therapies. But then you now became a coach yourself. But in all of this, what was your most profound Jesus experience?
I'm going to say that every day is a profound Jesus experience. And that sounds like such a cliche, right? But I think if you live a lifestyle that recognizes that you are a product of grace, every day is a realization that had it not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? So I can't really say, I gave my life to Christ when I was 50, but I never had one of those like, oh my gosh, I saw the light moments when I did. It was a very ordinary day right outside my sister's house. she just said, you know what, I want you to give your life to Christ. And I was like, yeah, okay. We said a prayer, and that was it. There was nothing spectacular about that event. But I know that I've always been spiritually attuned right from a very, very young age. And so I always had that awareness that God is with me. There is a higher being, there's a higher essence. And I've always lived with that truth. And I think, like I said, you know, the journey that I've been on, it can only have been every moment of a profound moment with Christ that I'm here today. And so for me, I think each day that I have been able to overcome and live another day is in and of itself that profound moment with Christ. And I think for me personally, I've had many aha moments. I've had many realizations, you know, that has made me realize, Banke, you had to go through this for that reason, and for that purpose. And so, yeah, I think there have just been many, many, many occasions where, I mean, God is always real to me.
Amazing.
You know,
so, for sake of clarity, you get, like, it's so beautiful, you know, when that statement that you made, like, every day is the profound Jesus experience, you know. But someone out there is saying, like, lady, I just heard your bio. And with what you've just told us of where you're coming from, it's, in quote, the least likely to succeed when something like that happens to a young lady. You understand? And everybody's looking at you like, she's still a young woman. So, like, how could she have been able to achieve all of this? You understand? And then still be able to say, like, oh, I owe it all to God. Because, like you said, at the risk of sounding cliche, we don't want to sound cliche. We want the listeners to have the real stuff, the real experience of, look, this is where I am coming from. And every day is a Jesus experience. And you've had lots of aha moments. But can you give us, like, the highest, like, the one aha moment that somebody can actually take with them today, be it in your personal life or in your career, that somebody can just take with them today to say, okay, that's definitely has got to be a Jesus effect?
I think my most recent aha moment would have been a few years ago, when I experienced a loss. And it was a very painful loss. It was a very, very devastating, sudden, unexpected loss. And I think I remember one day sitting on the stairs, just in grief, you know, when you're just lost in grief, but you know that there's no other way but God. And I just remember saying to God, look, you know, here I am. You know, I don't have words to pray. I don't even feel like praying. I don't want to read the Bible, but I just know that you are here. And I remember I sat on the stairs and I just repeated this one word over and over and over again. The word was strength. That was it. Nothing else. There was no dear Lord, please. And in repeating that word, I must have sat on the stairs for about an hour, just repeating that word, strength, 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 strength. And by the time I was kind of out of that out of body experience, my life really did change from that moment. I just realized that, you know what, there is nothing that I go through that God has not supplied an escape route for. There's no challenge. You know, the Bible tells that He doesn't give us more than we can handle. You know, I always question that scripture, but somehow I think it's true. And so that's one of my moments where God has been real to me, because He shows up. You know, the thing about God is He meets you at your point of need. He meets you where you are. And where I was at the time was only at the word strength. There was no other word. I couldn't pray. I couldn't read the Bible. I didn't want anyone around me. There was nothing else. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I've come to really appreciate about my relationship with God, is that He really meets you where you are at. And that means you can bring yourself as you are to Him. I think sometimes when we are walking this walk of faith, we feel like we have to be a certain way. We have to be perfectly righteous. We have to have all the scriptures in our heads. We have to pray a million tongues before we feel like God can hear us. But actually, what God is really interested in is the rawest version of yourself. Because it's the rawest version of yourself that He goes back to that place of creation and He begins to remold you as He did Adam from the clay. So me personally, you know, one of my profound moments has just been that realization that I don't have to fall for God. I don't have to be a certain way.
Hallelujah.
I come as I come as I am. And sometimes the way I come is really raw. It's really, really, really raw. It's my most, you know, naked version of myself. And I come to Him and He doesn't judge me as I am. Rather, He says, okay, come, daughter. Let's remold this part of you that's broken. Let's fix this part of you. Let's give you a new heart. Let's give you new vision. Let's go back to how it was in the beginning.
Mm.
when God made man. And that's that process that can be repeated over and over again, because with God there is no ending with him. So I think that's one of my profound experiences. I would say my genius moment, if you like.
Wow. That was so profound. Thank you so much for sharing that. And drawing from what you said about how your own experiences, moved you in the direction you had to get coaching, therapy, and all of that, and then you eventually became a coach yourself. Someone out there that is a young person is saying, I wanted to be a coach, but does that mean I have to go through pain? Does that mean that I have to? So, can you unpack that for us? Someone out there is saying that, so to become a coach or to become, somebody that helps other people to move from point A to point B, do I have to go through, is it like a rite of passage before you can actually call yourself a coach? Because we can see all the certifications and all the bodies that you belong to, but there is a lived experience that for me trumps, that outshines whatever certification you could ever get in coaching. So can you please unpack that for us?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I often teach something in my community around, how do we live purpose, right? There's always this question of, I don't know what my purpose is. How do I find my purpose? And oftentimes we think that the only route to purpose is through pain. But there are 4 spaces that I've personally learned, and I learned this from a mentor many, many years ago who talked to me through how to really discover your path to purpose. And one of the things is that, yes, pain can be a path to your purpose. Definitely. You can experience something really bad, overcome it, and because you have overcome it, you now want other people to learn how to overcome such.
Yeah.
That's one path to purpose. But there's another path to purpose where you see an opportunity. You realize that, there's a body of individuals out there in the world that don't have people to help them, to mentor them, to help change their vision or to help change their focus. I want to step into that space. So you can see that there's a gap in the space, gap in the market, gap in your community, and decide that that's actually where you want to step into, because you've got the skills, the expertise, the passion, the desires to make an impact in that space. So you can discover your path to purpose because you've seen a gap and an opportunity. The other path to purpose is what is called the promise. And this is where you've seen something that has tugged at your heart, and you're like, you know what, I pledge that when I have the ability to change the situation, I'm going to change it. I'm going to do what I can to help people. It might be you've seen a child, on the street, like oftentimes, in London, particularly at the moment, which is where I'm currently based, one of the things that tugs at my heart so much is when I see homeless people in the wintertime. Like it's something that my heart absolutely breaks about, because for someone who has such an aversion for the cold, I really despise and don't like winter. I cannot imagine what life is like for someone who has no home, no shelter, no hot water, no nothing. And so a pledge or a promise is you are so impacted by a situation, a circumstances, a community, an experience that you may not have lived through yourself, but you want to do something to change it. And so you may decide, you know what, when I get money, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a homeless shelter. I'm going to make sure that I can at least do my part to cater to people and run programs for rehabilitation, get them back into jobs, and etc. So that could be another path to purpose. And then the final path to purpose is where you see that, you know what, I'm passionate about this thing. Every time I wake up, the only thing that lights up my world is the passion to do or to be or to experience this. And so you become driven by your passion. Maybe it's art, maybe it's sculpting, maybe it's speaking, whatever your passion is, you then turn that passion into the pathway of your purpose. So to answer your question, Abimbola, about, do you have to have had horrible experience in order to be a coach? The answer is no, you don't. You can arrive at your journey as a coach in any way. It's coaching is a calling. I personally believe coaching is a calling. It is something that you have to have a heart for. You have to have a genuine desire to want to help transform people's lives in whatever way that looks like. It might be organizations, it might be individuals, leaders, it might be women, it might be children, but there's a desire that you have inside of you to want to help people, because coaching is about moving one person from this part of their lives into the ultimate expression of who they desire to be. So if you don't have that compassion, if you don't have that passion or desire, being a coach really is not going to be an effective journey for you. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow, that was a whole masterclass on purpose on its own. Moving from
masterclass on it. Yeah.
So purpose, and like you've just given us something to hold on to, and I believe that someone out there that has been thinking of coaching, mentoring, you probably just lifted a huge burden from off their chest, thinking like, hey, which pain am I going to have to go through to become a coach? So Coach Banke has made it clear pain is not the only route, it's not the only path to purpose. You can ride on the wings of opportunity, you can ride on the wings of the promise or pledge, and you can ride on the wings of passion. And if you want all of it to be peace, you can look at that opportunity as potential. What has potential around you, to give room for something. Wow, that was so profound. So now, still talking about coaching and how a young person or somebody that is looking to get into the profession, how they can merge faith and the kingdom values and everything in between. Because it's obvious you're unabashed about where you are sourced from. And I think that is a problem a lot of us or a lot of people face in the marketplace today, because at the risk of sounding uncool, at the risk of sounding like, what would they think of me? How do you marry that? How do you show up in the marketplace as your authentic Jesus girl, as your authentic kingdom-minded person? And still, because obviously to be affiliated with Oxford is not my money. You have to be top of the crop. You understand what I mean? So obviously there is excellence already speaking from the profile, but can you unpack that for us? Like, you are a Jesus girl. How do you show up at the top of the mountain and like they can't question that you actually know your onions, and also you are able to also bring your God to the table?
Yeah, that's, I love this question, because I have to be honest. I never classified myself as a Jesus girl. I still don't classify myself as a Jesus girl, because it's never been the way in which I've experienced myself. I'm a lover of Christ, and I just do what I need to do. And actually, it wasn't always the case where I was easy and bold to talk about my faith in a non-faith context. I think that's something that has evolved. One, through my own mentorship. I have a mentor, Dr. Lanra Olushola, who is an expert in the space of, coaching and life transformation, but brings in the spirituality with it. And actually, that's really where I learned that being a coach and the world of the spiritual actually do combine perfectly. I never started out my journey as a coach with that intention. Never. In fact, I used to feel quite like, because in the UK context especially, we have many ethical codes that we have to follow. You have to be very sort of mindful and about how you bring in your faith in certain areas. And I was always bound by that kind of, ethical regulations. It's the lawyer in me that's always wanted to be compliant, or thinking about, what's the compliant ways of thinking. Christ is in you and you are in Christ. So you can't help but actually always speak Christ anyway.
Finds a way
but
to
instead of being explicit about, I'm a Jesus girl and all of that, it was never my thing, and it still isn't. I don't think you will find me on a platform, apart from maybe the Christian platform where I sometimes do some preaching on, where I'm like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus every 5 seconds. And the reason why is because it is not about you professing to be Jesus, Jesus girl. It is about you living and being the embodiment of Christ. Right? The whole idea of I'm a Jesus girl and I'm announcing it everywhere is not my mode of operation. I think people will see Jesus in you because of your character. And that's more important than what you announce yourself to be. Christ didn't go around announcing himself as, I'm this and this and that. It was the acts that he did that made people know and recognize him as the living truth. And I think that's the model we ought to follow as Christians. When you go around, and this is not to knock anybody who refers to themselves in that way or has that, as their own identity. That's absolutely fine. It's just me personally, what works for me is about, does my character exude Christ? That's what more I'm concerned about, more than what I call myself. If I call myself a Jesus girl, but people don't see the Jesus in me, I'm not a Jesus girl. And so my coaching, yes, over time does embed more spirituality, but more the principles of spirituality. And because I have now learned that actually when we think about, what coaching is, Christ was the ultimate coach. He was the ultimate coach where he helped individuals transform their lives. And I've learned in my own journey as I've grown in my own coaching practice, like I mentioned through my mentor, the various interventions, the various tools and strategies that we deploy as coaches, they have so much relatability with the Christian faith, with the spiritual faith, actually. So not even just Christianity. It is more weaved into just the spiritual principles that exude the sovereignty and powerful transformative impact that God has in each of our lives. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I always check and ask myself, am I embodying Christ wherever I go? And what is the embodiment of Christ? Love, compassion, forgiveness, peace, harmony, being present, faith, trust. Those are the things that really show Christ's virtue, rather than I'm a Jesus girl and every 5 minutes I need to throw Jesus in the context of what. So that's really where I would how I would answer that.
Amazing. And I think that's just so profound. I think it's more on the fruits that you bear more than the things that you profess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's more in, and I think that resonates deeply. It's not until you open your mouth to say, oh, there's this thing that most people even have when somebody is quick to say, I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor, I'm a this. People are just always quick to say, okay, we need to now watch you closely and pay more attention to the things that you do, because most often than not, it ends up, going south, because like everything that you mentioned, am I embodying Christ? Am I actually, what would Jesus do? That's slogan that some people came up with some years ago. What would Jesus do? In that situation, and that's just so profound. So, and I think that gives some form of clarity to someone out there that wants to go into coaching but doesn't know how to navigate the terrain of, okay, how do I merge the two? You just need to show up as your authentic self, like Coach Banke has said. No matter what mountain that you're on, the first thing that you need to, am I embodying Christ in what I am doing? Is Christ shining through? And if that is the case, I think you're good to go. I think that's the path that we need to take. So now, I've just been reflecting on the story, on your story, like you mentioned, and you mentioned things about healing, forgiveness, and what have you. And I know someone out there is listening and saying, like, some things are unforgivable. Some things you can't heal from. Some things you can't let go. You can't ever let go. Some things you can never forget. Can you unpack that for us? Because I know, like that's like an area of strength for you, and I think it would be a blessing to a lot of people to actually bring light to that aspect of their lives that they might be thinking that, look, I can never forgive that. I can never let that go. Can you unpack that for us, Coach Banke?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think just last week I actually preached a message on this topic, or I spoke on the message on this topic. I think the first thing is forgiveness is a choice. Understanding first and foremost, forgiveness is a choice. And so, yes, you are right. You can choose that I will never let this go. It's a choice. That's the first thing. Second thing is forgiveness actually does more benefit to you than the person or the thing that you need to forgive. Why is that? Unforgiveness is a very deadly emotion. It's one of the emotions that leads to literally physical diseases in the body. Because any emotion is supposed to be energy in motion, right? That's why it's called emotion, energy in motion. And so when you have emotions that are not processed, expressed, out, let go of, what you are ultimately doing is you are causing those emotions to remain trapped in your body. When emotions become trapped in your body, they eventually start to eat away at your body. That's why you will have physical diseases, physical illnesses, all manners of things begin to manifest themselves because emotions have not had a place to express and to let go of. That's the second thing to note, that one, forgiveness is a choice. It's up to you to do it or not. It's entirely up to you. But number two, it's actually in your interest to forgive if you want to live a good, healthy and prosperous, thriving life. I think there's a quote that talks about, unforgiveness is like drinking your own poison and expecting the other person to die from that poison. The third thing that I would say about forgiveness is that you don't have to forget in order to forgive. I think this is my own personal view. I think there's a misconception that you need to forgive and forget. Why is that? If you think about the way in which the mind is created, the brain is actually designed physiologically to store memories. It's part of the biological function of every living creature, whether you are human or you are an animal, you have capacity to store memories. Elephants tell us this. They show us this skill set that they have because they bank in their memories certain journey pathways that they can revisit over and over again, and it passes down generations to generations to generations of elephants. So in other words, what I'm saying is there is always going to be a part of your mind, a part of your brain that is going to remember, unless you suffer from amnesia, unless you go through, I don't know, something like hypnosis or whatever. You are always going to have a form of memory. What is important about forgiveness, however, is that even when that memory resurfaces, it does not leave you with an emotional charge of sadness, hurt, bitterness, or whatever adverse emotion you originally had to that experience. And so forgiveness is literally a decision that you make that says, you know what, this person did me wrong. I may never get justice for this. It is still wrong what they did. However, because I want to live a life that is fulfilling and free of bitterness and resentment, I am choosing to let this thing go. I am choosing to say, this thing or this person no longer has a hold over my life. I choose to forgive and move on. You see, when you don't make that choice, actually what you're doing is you're giving the other person or the situation full control over you. Because every time that person shows up, a memory of that person shows up, you are now wired to hate that person or to be resentful of that person or be bitter of that person, be angry of that person. You have given them control. You have allowed them to control your emotions. You have allowed them to rob you of your joy. You have allowed them to rob you of your peace. So actually, you saying, I can never forgive, you're giving them more control to keep you bound in that space of injustice that you have a sense of. Meanwhile, the person that you're saying, I will never forgive, they're busy with their life. They don't even remember you. You're not even a speck of dust in their memory. Just they're getting on with their lives. Whether you are angry, whether you forgive, whether you don't forgive, that's your business. The people have moved on. And so I always say, of a truth, it's not easy to forgive. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. I think it's important we hold space for that truth. Forgiveness is hard. It is painful. I've had to go through many things in my own personal life where forgiving has not come easy. In one situation, it took 3 years for me to get to a space where I said, I'm going to forgive and I'm going to let go. So I want to really acknowledge that when people struggle with forgiveness, it's actually okay. But understand that unforgiveness only does more damage to you than the other. So I would say that those are my views on forgiveness. And how do you forgive? It takes time. It takes time, and it just takes that willingness to just, process your emotions first. I think the reason why people struggle with forgiving is because they have not owned their own emotions. They haven't given those emotions a form of expression. They haven't allowed it to come out of their system so that they can feel a relief and a reprieve for them to be able to forgive. So I would say for anyone struggling with forgiveness, deal with your emotions first. Really get, to the root of those emotions. Let those emotions go, and you will find that it becomes easier to forgive.
Amazing.
That so many of us as Christians, we are not making progress in the marketplace. The opportunities for us to impact government, impact economy, impact nations, impact leadership, impact health, impact education, impact so many aspects of everyday life is lost because we have confined ourselves to such religious context that has no place in the marketplace. Don't hide in the corner. Don't be that one in the boardroom or in the meeting or in the team context that has this brilliant idea, but you're quiet. Let your voice be heard.
We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. We are a city set upon the hill that cannot be hidden. Why are we hiding?
Shine your light. The Bible says, arise and shine. Just go and do that. Arise in wherever you find yourself. Arise and shine.
And that is the end of part 1. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification for this channel so that you will be the first to know when the next part 2 of the episode drops. And until next time, stay blessed and stay on purpose.